In the 1840s, Cincinnati was in the midst of a pandemic. A cholera outbreak killed off 4% of the city population. Family plots and church graveyards were overwhelmed. The solution? Make a giant graveyard that would also be a public park. Tonight, the fascinating story of Spring Grove Cemetery.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another wonderful episode of the Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities presents the Hometown Haunts podcast. I am your host, Kat Cloco, and with me every week in the shadows are Christina Wald and Jen Kohler. And of course, like every week, I remind you that you can find us on social media. Yes, we are not ghosts in the closet. We actually have social media accounts, and you can follow us at Sin Cabinet Curio on Twitter, at Cincy Cabinet of Curiosities on Instagram, and you can always send us your hometown haunts, creepy cryptids, or interesting urban legends, or interesting history at hometownhauntedmail@gmail.com, and we'll read that on the show. And thanks to Jen, we're an official podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, and SoundCloud. Find us on iTunes at Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities, and please remember to rate and review us there and also on YouTube, so other spooky lovers just like you can find us. Links also for all of our sources are in the show notes. So we have a very small corrections corner. This is our 40th episode and our first corrections corner. So I think our odds are pretty good so far. Or no one has spoken up, one or the other. And this is from the Oxford Museum Association in regards to last week's episode about the Doty family homestead episode we did. And I majorly messed up somebody's name over and over and over again. So I'm sorry, all of you historians, that you were just cringing and going, just like ghosts talking to the living, like screaming at whatever device you're listening to, going, no, it's pronounced this way. And I'm going to listen one last time to make sure I get this right. So her name was Keziah Doty, not Kaziza, not Gesundheit, not whatever I said. It was Keziah Doty. So yeah, I messed that one up pretty royally. I'm sorry about that. But thank you. It was Michael Case from the Oxford Museum Association that just poked his head in on our YouTube and went, hey, by the way, you mispronounced it. And I'm happy to say, oops, I'm sorry. But thank you for letting us know. So, moving on to the Doty homestead and people that have experienced the wonders of that place. We welcome back a friend to the show, Amanda. Hey, welcome back.
Hi.
And hi. Just a little short info for people who are new to you and to us. You're not only a paranormal investigator with Spiritual Realm Paranormal, who we investigated the homestead with last weekend, but also a docent at Spring Grove Cemetery, and you're here tonight to talk all about that wonderful place we'll all call home someday.
I will, and I have plans around that, but it does not involve my my docent discount on a plot. Shh, I have plans. Anyhow, don't tell Spring Grove.
Right. And then also, you're fresh off an investigation too.
Yeah, we were invited to, and it's on our site, and we have a ton of footage and recordings to go over. But we were invited up to what is going to be the hub in Hamilton. It's at the corner of F and Main, and it is the Hamilton Urban Backyard. So awesome spot. The house is from around 1855. Really, really cool place. It's been built onto about 1 million times. It's been a saloon and a store, and there's an apartment. So really cool old building, and super cool thing, especially for the community they're doing, because there's going to be, food trucks and, all of the craft beers you could ever want. And it's, it was pretty cool. Still trying to process a lot from it. So.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I'm looking at a photo of it right now, thanks to Google Maps. And that does look like an excellent old building that I know there's one or two people lurking around in there.
There is more than that. They are very, very active. They especially, probably the most that I've ever experienced with being able to communicate through equipment, through using flashlights and REM pods. And it was insanely active. And for any sensitives out there, you would understand that places that have been built onto and changed around a million times, it takes so long to not feel like you're in a labyrinth.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense for quite a while. But overall, very, very good investigation, and a lot. Our team's room is going nuts with. Did you hear that? But listen again. But did you hear that? So,
Yeah. Is this place sitting on top of the old bootlegging tunnels?
Not that we know of. There was a couple of bits of confirmation. I mean, it was, besides just the history of it, where it was a saloon, prohibition happened, and they became a soda shop.
Of course.
We all know how that goes. And there's some really interesting architecture in the basement that would definitely make me think that it was part of that at some point. And then just confirmation with talking to the folks who were there.
Yeah. Did you ever do Ryan's Tavern? That's in Hamilton. They're on down. They have since closed, and they're a different restaurant and bar now. Yeah. But they used to be an Irish bar that was right on that old bootlegging line. And we actually, when I was there, I can't remember which paranormal team I was working with, because I wrote about them in a book about the location, but we actually witnessed an apparition of a man go right into the blocked off tunnel. Like we could see him wearing the beat up denim overalls and the gray shirt and the little cap and everything go right into a clearly walled off what was a tunnel.
Okay. So that, and we're going to completely derail the entire podcast, but yeah, we'll need to talk about the cap, because I saw some. Are you talking about kind of the page boy?
I always call it a page boy cap, and you'd see it. So oh man, I should probably look it up to make sure I got it right. But yeah, it's the one where basically the front laps on top of the little brim, and it's like that really indicative of the 1930s, late 1920s.
Right.
Them wearing it all over Downton Abbey if you watch that show. That outfit, and then of course the really beat up overalls and then boots, and he was wearing dark colored, I presume black boots that had mud on them. Like the entire outfit was, this guy had been just going through tunnels for the entire day. Right. Hamilton was a huge prohibition town, prohibition in quotes here, because they had John Dillinger stayed in a brothel not too far away from downtown, and they had entire streets dedicated to saloons and houses of ill repute. And it was a cool down spot for a lot of the larger gangs from Cleveland and Detroit and Chicago. And like I said, Dillinger's last hurrah was, I think, in Hamilton before he was killed in Indiana. Was it Indiana or was it Chicago? It was one of his last cool down spots. And so interesting little town. It has a lot of history, and it's only been recently that people have been talking about it.
I will have to definitely dig into that more, because we obviously, just as a group, we have a lot of connections in Hamilton and spend a lot of time up there. So yeah, I will definitely dig into that a little bit more.
Oh yeah. I think the place that Dillinger stayed at still is standing. It's just a private residence now.
Right. I'll have to dig into that, kind of see where the building that we were in is in conjunction to that. Yeah. All right. There's a rabbit hole. I'll be going down that one.
But going through the newspaper archives, there were shootouts there almost weekly, which was quite frequent for the late 20s, early in the 30s. So they would have shootouts. There would be police officers killed, people randomly deputized to become sheriffs to take care of all this stuff. So it was an interesting time, and I think Hamilton saw more of the gangster action at that time than Cincinnati did. Definitely Hamilton and Newport were the hot spots. They just kind of traversed through Cincinnati, but just delivering stuff, but it wasn't too terrible. So, okay. So that sounds like a fun night. And
Yeah.
I think our listeners always love listening to weird ghost investigations that people do. So,
And we can put
Yeah.
links so people can see photos and see that cool video you posted and some stuff like that, to kind of get a sneak into what you are doing, because it's pretty exciting. And you have more planned too. Are you doing regular investigations now?
We're working. We have a couple that are about to flip. We are definitely confirmed for the world's largest ghost hunt again this year. So we'll be involved in that. I'm not 100% sure if we've committed to one of our new places or if we might be back at the Bennyhofen. So anyway, around that we'll be involved there, and then gonna try and get another new venue for a public investigation out here in the next couple of months. But we have Delta variant and Ashley's pregnant, so we got we have a lot to deal with.
yeah, that's a difficult tightrope to be walking.
Right.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Well, on to Spring Grove, where I am very interested in knowing, Amanda, how you got involved with becoming a docent at Spring Grove.
Right. I am definitely one of the youngest. I was the youngest, except for I brought a friend in that kind of followed the same path as I did. So I'm still involved with, but I was competitively involved with roller derby. So played for the Sensei Roller Girls for quite a while. And when my back and my knees and my ankles said, no, you're too old for this, you like to walk, I decided to retire and just train people, and I announce. So I was looking for something to do, and I'd been on a ton of tours at Spring Grove because they're very good at doing public tours. They have walking tours, tram tours, and my oldest son thoroughly enjoyed trams. Like that, trams, trains, any sort of transportation was his thing. So looking into Spring Grove, I'm like, so for $5 a person, I can take the kid on a tram and he's thrilled, and I get to learn history. Hell yeah. Like that's everything that I need for a weekend. I'm done. So after going on basically every tour that they had and every chance that we had, there was like one of those moments where there was a couple in front of me on the tram and had a question. And I went, oh, I don't mean to eavesdrop, but here's the answer to all of that. And oh my gosh, the cemetery is the best place in the world to go to learn local history, and it's amazing. And so the culmination of that experience and retiring from roller derby, it's like, oh crap, I can go volunteer there. And went through about a year of being a docent in training. So basically learned how to drive the tram. You drive the tram for other people, or hold up the back end on walking tours. But went through the process, became certified with Spring Grove, and I absolutely love it. I think out of a lot of the things that I volunteer to do, because I'm a serial volunteerer, that's definitely one of my favorites. Best place in the world.
How often are you there then?
During a typical summer, probably for doing tours and such, about once a month. I try and get there at least every weekend when stuff's not completely crazy, just to walk around and either practice a tour, learn a new one. There's a couple that I have kind of in the back of my mind in development, or just to straight up get lost, because there's here, hold on. I have my notes. It is not committed to memory. 42 miles of paved roadways.
Hey!
42 miles. So it is super easy to get lost there, and one of the best things in the world to do, because it seems like there's always something new to discover when you're just wandering around.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And it's a cool place. It's for those, I have some facts information sheet in front of me. It's 733 acres.
733 acres, and I'm trying to get through to my, because you're probably looking at like the the facts and trivia, which I have that because typically on the history and heritage tour, there's a chunk of time where there's not anything that you're looking at and everybody's just walking. It's like, okay, well, it's fun fact time, folks.
Yeah, you have to fill in that dead air time.
Right. It's like, otherwise I'm just going to lose people. They're going to wander. But yeah, there's 733 acres, but only 435 of them are developed. So yeah, I don't know if your notes go into it, but basically Spring Grove is about another, and this is such a wide gap because of current burial trends, but about 350 to 500 years from being full. So
wow.
Yeah, there will be generations upon generations that can still be interred at Spring Grove.
There's a chance for me.
There is.
Yay.
Now, I don't want to be buried, but I might change my mind on that. I would love to spend eternity at Spring Grove.
They've actually the burial trends, in the death industry are starting to move more towards cremation. That seems to be more so what our generations are leaning towards. And Spring Grove has opened up a couple of it's basically walking paths with a rock that will have the placard of whoever's name is interred there, and they will inter the cremains under the rock. So
okay,
That
take
was
up
kind
far
of by
less space.
That was kind of what it was like by the Johnny Appleseed area, right? That was
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit up there. If you're going up and you pass like the Navy ship and going up towards the Spongebobs, these are exact directions, folks. There's a couple of paths up there. You'll see a little what is it? Just a little like covered area where they can have the ceremonies and stuff there before interring them up in the paths in the woods.
okay.
Yeah.
Are they? I have two questions. One, do they still let the Boy Scouts do their little camping trips there?
Camping trips, I'm not sure of, but I know that they definitely are out every Memorial Day and put flags at each one of the graves of in the Civil War section.
Okay. I remember my brother, when he was younger, went on some sort of camping thing with Boy Scouts, but it was like way in the back of Spring Grove.
Right.
Where it was wooded, and he and his friends snuck away and I think walked around the cemetery.
Of course.
That's awesome. Yeah.
My
husband grew up right across the street from there, and most of his childhood was playing in Spring Grove. So
that's amazing.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's
we will
a good
talk
place
about
to
what he
play.
did there as a teenager. So
Okay.
I'm sure you've heard of the tree pods that people can be buried in and grown into a tree. Does Spring Grove have any? First of all, do they have room for something like that? Or I don't even know if that's legal here yet.
Right. That's the thing. It's not going to be legal here yet. There's still a lot of, the whatever the remains are, whether it's a body or cremains, still have to be in a concrete vault. And which, I think the tree ones are great. It's absolutely asinine that much waste has to go into preserving something that's just going to decay. But neither here nor there. Yeah, it's more a matter of where it is.
Okay. Is the concrete vault to protect, like, I don't know, like if you were a cancer patient and had radiation and cancer drugs and everything, or is it to protect you from like being grave rot?
I thought it was to protect the water system.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. There's probably going to be some water system there. Also, probably a side benefit of it. When y'all were walking around Spring Grove, or the next time that you're there, there's a couple of really good examples at the Pogue Monument. For anybody that possibly from this area remembers the 70s, Pogue's was a department store.
I remember Pogue. I just saw that grave. I was thinking, I remember Pogue's.
Yep. Yeah. So Pogue's
My aunt
department
used
store.
to work there.
Oh, nice. But in front of the Pogue Monument, you'll see a couple of burials that have like this foliage on top of them that's just a couple of inches tall. And those are grave blankets. So what those were used for is, you would bury a family member in a wooden box, and as decay happens and weight happens on the wood, it would collapse in. So the next time you would go to visit your loved one, you would see this depression in the ground, and that was not what they wanted for, this positive reflection and nice place to go. So they put grave blankets, this foliage that would just grow a couple of inches high. So the concrete vaults also protect from that. They're going to keep from that real, obvious sinkage in the ground.
I always wondered what those were for. I always thought it was to keep the zombies in.
Well, that too.
Just make it difficult to get out.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad you brought those up, because I've seen those so many times and had no idea what they were.
Yep, grave blankets.
So on this is a little side tangent, but when my grandfather died a couple years ago, my sister and I went to the funeral ahead of time, or to the cemetery ahead of time, and they were in the process of digging the grave. And I got to see my grandma's vault, or my great grandmother's vault. And I think the worker there, he thought it was a little strange that we were there, but I thought it was so cool that I got to say hi to my great grandma.
Right?
Because I didn't get to go to her funeral. So I thought it was a cool insight to see how the process was, how it went.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think we're so death averse and averse to talking about it as a society, that you don't realize everything that goes into a modern burial. So
yeah, it gets rather complicated.
Complicated and expensive. Really
expensive. There's a lot of high pressure sales from the mortician aspect, and because they have overhead too, and surprisingly, funeral homes can't hold that many bodies at a time. Yeah. So
how many can Spring Grove hold? Do you know, or is that something that's not public knowledge? Or
well, I like I said, there's going to be differing numbers just based on burial trends, but there's 220,000 total burials there now, and they inter about 1,400 to 1,500 people per year. So 1,400 to 1,500 times 350 to 500 years. I have an art degree and can't do math. Go for it.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah,
right,
it's still a lot.
Right. And one thing that I don't know, and I'll have to remember to ask this on our next docent meeting, but if you're driving up Gray Road before it becomes, I can't remember what it becomes, but on Gray Road, there's, you're going by Spring Grove, but over on the other side, there's the Willows. And that's Spring Grove property, but it was originally meant to be a pet cemetery. So,
yeah. That was one of my questions, because I know you can't, there are a few people buried with their pets, but this was a while ago, and it's probably not possible now.
No.
But I thought there was a pet cemetery or one planned. So one planned.
You can still see the sign, even though it's disintegrating, but I don't know if there's any plans for it. So maybe that's what I'll corner the CEO this year at the Christmas party and nudge for some info. I'll let y'all know.
Yeah, that'd be good.
That's
which reminds me with the names, actually. So I did, in my little info sheet, get all the names that were rejected for Spring Grove Cemetery. Have you heard them?
No, I have not.
This
I'm
is
super
fun.
interested. Yeah.
So Spring Grove, of course, was put together, chartered in 1845 by the Horticultural Society of Cincinnati. Was that it?
Yep. Those wonderful country gentlemen that were living in Clifton. They had their summer homes in Clifton.
Yes. Well, they had a number of names they went through. They actually had 2 different cycles of names they went through to find the perfect one, which ended up being Spring Grove. But I am going to read to you the rejected ones.
Yes, please.
So the first one was Cincinnati Rural Cemetery. That sounds efficient and quick to the point, and not at all romantic. Yeah,
but that's not.
So the next one was Maketwa, And then Machpelah, those are two, which I'm going to think maybe they're Native American names that they were trying to loan out into the cemetery. That's just my hunch. Rose Hill, Shadeland, Oakland, Mount Hope, Rosedale, Fairlawn, Miami, Walnutdale, Cincinnati Cemetery, the Elms, Rosemont, Greenvale, Mount Repose, Hopeland. Somebody really liked the Hope and Land put together. Glenwood, Willow Glen, Oakland Valley, Elmwood, Hazelwood, and my favorite, and I'm sad they didn't use it, Silent Hill.
Oh, well, that would have been interesting. I've been to Silent Hill before, and the graffiti highway before they covered it up.
Yeah.
I mean, bastards. Anyhow, that it was so pretty.
It was really cool, but yeah, it's
right.
Yeah, Silent Hill swing and a miss like 170 years too early.
Well, I also like that, Spring Grove is the second largest next to Rose Hill in California. So name's taken. Wasn't taken then, but
yeah, now name is taken.
But yeah, I think we went through like half of the graveyard cemetery names that are out there. Yeah,
or retirement centers. They kind of share the same name pool.
That's so true. That's so
you don't want to make it complicated.
Yeah, like Fairlawn Retirement Center and Suites or something like that. That sounds perfectly plausible.
Spring Grove makes sense. There are springs there. That's what all
there's springs. And there's a grove, and that works. You have your own water supply from all those springs.
It was a cow farm, so
Yeah, I love how they always give names to places like that are very like kind of oxymoronic. It's like they're the opposite of what. Like I think my father's retirement home, that he was in, was called Vibrant Life or something like that, which of course it's not vibrant at all. It was like the exact opposite of what it was like, but I think that, it's what they wish it would be, it's sort of a wishful.
Yeah, there's a lot of aspirational motivation going into these names.
If you actually used a realistic description, no one would want to go there.
No.
This is where you come to die.
Yeah, if you called it listless life, it probably would not, get the same reaction.
Dysentery Junction. Where life keeps running on down your pants. Sorry.
Yeah, that's a good one. The cholera joke.
oh God. Was that too soon?
And speaking of how Spring Grove started, talk about the cholera.
Cholera, the thing that Cincinnati is very familiar with. Amanda, how did Spring Grove Cemetery come to be?
Would you like to know? All right.
Yes, please.
You're going to get the first part of my tour, and I do my tour how I like to do my tour. So this is what I'm interested in. So when I was doing research, because they, as a docent, they want you to form it to, what you're interested in. I'm interested in Cincinnati history, all aspects of it. We have one docent who's an architect, so she focuses very heavily on that. So as I was doing research, Cincinnati's oldest burial ground was at 4th and 5th and Walnut in Maine, downtown. So that's according to the original 1788 city plans. So if we think about where that is now, that is right in the middle of everything. In the 1700s, this was a peripheral part of the city. This was way out.
So the next time you're at Oktoberfest using the Portaloo, just imagine that's where we kept the dead bodies.
Right, exactly. So there were so many bodies, starting to accumulate there by the 1830s, the bodies and the gravestones that included Cincinnati's first settlers were starting to really build up. So they transferred them to the municipal graveyard up to what was then much less crowded. It was the Episcopal and Presbyterian Burial Ground, so also known as the 12th Street Burial Ground, which
Ladies,
is
we
what
know this
now-
one. Washington Park.
Right. That's why we're still finding bodies today underneath that and Music Hall. So, not to mention, besides Music Hall, there was the Paupers Burial Ground. There was which for back then, how convenient was it for grave robbers to just go to where Washington Park is, get a fresh body, and take it across the street to the medical hospital and just sell it right there.
Yep.
So, yeah, back to cholera. 1830s, 1840s had a resurgence of cholera, and people then thought that it was airborne. So they were wanting the bodies buried as quickly as possible. So with the epidemic of cholera and the cemeteries just being crowded and unkept, a lot of the church cemeteries in the basin area that were still there were really just disheveled and filling up. So the leaders, professional and in industry here in the city, expressed like a lot of concern about that. We have to do something. So going to your Cincinnati Horticultural Society, they kind of, took it up and decided to form a cemetery association in 1844. And just to give an idea, because even though I'm bad at math, I do like numbers. So Cincinnati was rapidly expanding during this time. So there were 46,000 people in 1840 to 115,000 in 1850. So roughly 70,000 people in population in 10 years. So
Oof.
between 2000 and 2010, we had roughly half that in population increase in Cincinnati. So small, stinky, and people dying of cholera.
And canals everywhere.
Right. Which, guess what? It wasn't airborne. So
surprise.
Yeah. So yeah, they were looking for a picturesque park-like rural cemetery. So close to the city, yet not close enough to be disturbed anytime soon. And they wanted something that was, this was the Victorian era. So they were looking for something that was more in line with the sensibilities of that time. They wanted that romantic park-like, someplace to think and, console and all that fun stuff. So originally there was 220 acres that were acquired to form the Cemetery of Spring Grove, dedicated on August 28th of 1845. And then the first interment there was September 1st of 1845. I say first interment, they're not there anymore. So that's that comes up.
Did they
later.
get yeeted out of the cemetery? What happened to them?
So what I have found out, because that was kind of like, where did they go? Back then, if you had the means to, if you moved from one city to the other, you would take your family with you. So there were two sisters that were interred, and then they were taken to, I believe, if memory serves, they were taken to Wisconsin and interred there where the family moved to. So, yep, go get grandma. We're heading off.
I guess that's what goes on top of the moving van.
Just wrap it on up there. Let's go.
That's
You okay there, Jen?
Yeah.
That's really fascinating how attitudes have changed, that you wouldn't want your family to leave.
Right. That it's completely different now. Completely different. Unless you have like grandma on an urn on the mantle, but that's otherwise you leave them be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow.
Mm.
Now was it Adolf Strauch? Is that how you pronounce his name?
I will keep you from a correction corner. It is Adolf
No, that's
Strauch.
fine. Correct
Yeah.
corner me now.
Strauch.
Okay.
Strauch. Yeah.
So he was the landscape artist or architect that put this all together, and he's buried there.
Yes, he is. That's always a fun one to point out to folks. So there were the reason that Spring Grove is internationally known I would say besides just the size of it is because of Adolf Strauch. I love learning about him. I have books on him. He's an incredibly interesting guy. But there were two landscape architects before that. The first one was brought in from Philadelphia, and he set it up in like a grid pattern. So not what they wanted. The directors were like, get the hell out.
It sounds like Philadelphia.
Right. Yep. Said, we're going to do grids. The second one was developed more of like the picturesque sort of Victorian era design, but he allowed foliage to kind of take over everything. So this was Victorian era, so foliage, the more the better. So there were benches, there were fences, which fences I can kind of understand because it was still kind of a cow farm. So you don't want to come and visit grandma and see a cow standing on her grave. So, you can kind of understand some of the ornamental bits, but that it became very, one of the best quotes that I heard was when Adolf Strauch showed up, it looked like a Victorian marble yard sale. Just shit everywhere. Yep.
What's Bessie doing to Grandma's grave?
Don't worry about it.
Oh, goodness. Thank you,
away.
Cincinnati. Thank you.
Yep.
Stay classy, Cincinnati. So he cleaned up a lot of the foliage and ornaments.
Right.
He put in like, what was it, restrictions for height?
Not necessarily for height, because then the Mulhauser obelisk probably wouldn't be there. But
okay, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So what he did, what his basically instructions were, that as you're going through the cemetery, you can kind of tell somewhere around the 80s that they just went off plan, and it's kind of a free for all, and there's weird bushes everywhere, and it's not what Spring Grove is when you kind of think of that initial walk through the railroad bridge, like.
Question, 1880s or 1980s?
1980s.
Okay,
yes,
there
I'm
we go.
completely blaming it on the 1980s.
Okay.
Nobody cared. They wanted to do what the hell they wanted to do. But when you initially walk through, and especially in the old historic section, what Adolf Strauch put in place with his landscape design was to have one central monument for a family or on a family plot, and then around it there could be footstones, like against the ground footstones. And yeah, that's Adolf Strauch went completely with his own design, because he did die of pneumonia in the cemetery. And if you're walking through, especially up the White Line, you can see an island, and that's Strauch Island. And he has a very small, rounded granite footstone that just Strauch, and that's it. So he didn't even go for any sort of a monument, just the one little guy on the island.
Oh, that's sweet though. Very minimalist. Very
right.
Before his time.
He was a little, like, I love the little bit of an ego that he has, because one of my favorite like quotes, he what do you say? Spring Grove could serve as the most interesting of all places for contemplative recreation if only he were permitted to make everything tasteful, classical, and poetical. If only he were permitted. Thanks, Adolf. Granted, he did a lot of other stuff in Cincinnati that we still use to this day. But yeah, that was, it could be this if only you'd let me loose on it. So
yeah.
All designers feel that way.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
It's just singing the song of all designers.
But I know what you mean about the 80s, because there is that section. Jen and I drove, we're over there Sunday, and there is that section with all the more modern stones, and they're just stuck everywhere.
Yeah.
Like, it looks like they just, didn't think about making it look, it just doesn't look as nice there. Yeah.
Right. And like boxwoods planted in between it's just, for also being a nationally recognized arboretum, that kind of surprises me that sort of like, even though it's not overgrown, I think boxwoods just look overgrown.
Yeah, they do.
Unless you're really trying to take care of them. So yeah, I think that section kind of sticks out as a sore thumb, but.
Yeah. So moving about sections, can you tell us a little bit about is it Dexter Mausoleum, which is in section 20, which caught my eye as soon as I drove in. I'm like, what are you beautiful thing doing there?
It catches everybody's eye. But I will say that unfortunately, even though it's like a completely amazing mausoleum, there's a really good story behind it. One of the more interesting people in Spring Grove, and I'm trying to get to him now so I don't mispronounce his name.
We don't need to do a corrections corner for you.
No. Okay. And you know what? They may still correct me on it, but my tour, y'all. That's how it's going to go. Right across from the Dexter is Charles Petit McElvain. And doing the tour, I'm like, okay, I know you want to know about the Dexter because it's really freaking cool. And I can guarantee you that every goth in Cincinnati got their senior pictures taken there. But we're going to look over here for a minute. So yeah, but he super cool. He has his bust on it, but one of the more interesting things about him, besides the fact that Lincoln asked him specifically to go and talk to Great Britain after the Trent affair, which was basically him going, we're cool, just help us, it's okay. During the Civil War, he died in Florence, Italy. And then on his journey home, he was honored for 4 days at Westminster Abbey. So he is the only American to ever lay in state at Westminster Abbey.
Wow.
So
Oh, wow.
I think he's incredibly cool. But yes, the Dexter is the Gothic Revival family mausoleum. It has the flying buttresses, which most people say that it's modeled after Saint Chapelle, but it's not. It's modeled after Chichester Cathedral in England. So it's one of those, if you look at pictures, absolutely, like it's dead on for Chichester. Probably the coolest thing about it structure-wise, besides, well, number one, it was never finished. Like the way that it's sitting there, it's not finished. But it was designed for the kind of arch that you see at the bottom. You go in, and that's where the catacombs are. So that's where the bodies are interred. But there was meant to be an elevator. So the stairs on the sides, people would go up, go into the cathedral at the top, be seated there, and the body would come up through the elevator. They would have the service, come down, and be interred. So super cool. If you're looking at it, or if you look at pictures of it, the windows actually got blown out at one point. There was a spire on top of it that got hit by lightning. So that spire, from what I've heard, is in the lake right behind it.
Wow.
Wow.
Are there any pictures of the spire, like in the old photos of Cincinnati or anything?
Did you find the DeLorean?
It wasn't the clock tower, y'all. It was a mausoleum. That would be a fun, creepy story. I like that.
That would be.
But no, and one of the so before I go into like Dexter, the family, they were rectifiers, not distillers of Kentucky bourbon. So they had a store down on Sycamore, sold the kegs and the jugs to restaurants and grocery stores and all that stuff. And they actually lived where, going back to downtown, Western Southern Life Insurance Company.
Oh,
that's where the Dexter's home was. So they had people visiting there, like, what was it? You're probably gonna have to cut this off. Oh, there we go. Charles Dickens and the Prince of Wales visited them there. So the Dexters were really, really something until Prohibition. So Prohibition
wasn't everyone
everything.
Something until Prohibition.
Right. So one thing on the tour that I can usually get to before the Dexter, because people have a lot of questions about the structure of it. All of the plots at Spring Grove are privately owned. If something happens to a monument, it is the responsibility of the family to fix it. Spring Grove does not have the permissions to be able to go onto it and fix anything. But there are a couple of exceptions. So if you're driving around kind of the main historical loop, there's the Hunnifeld Mausoleum. And actually, Michael Griffith talked about Hunnifeld in his book. It's like one of the very first stories in there. But Hunnifeld purchased perpetual care. So like in 1918, paid $2,000 for every couple of years. They have it pressure washed, they have it caulked. So if you go by that mausoleum, it is in amazing condition. But then you get over to the Dexter, and that's one of the few mausoleums besides the Robinson Mausoleum that the cemetery has actually come in and done, repair work and done structural work on, because if they didn't, the Dexter, the entirety of it would be in the lake by now. So it was starting to kind of slide down the hill a little bit.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
So are you allowed to go inside it at all, or is that strictly a no-no?
Big no-no. There are some docents who have been able to go in there. They have taken a drone in there, but like when you're looking at the stairs going up and there's the gates, those gates were added by the cemetery because it's just not safe to walk on it at all.
So it's that structurally unsound at this point.
Structurally unsound, and also underneath the buttresses, the concrete through there is just always covered in moss, and it's just it's a hazard from start to finish.
Yeah.
So it could conceivably fall down at some point.
I think there's probably a lot of them that could potentially fall down. One that I'm surprised about is the Burnette Mausoleum. So if you're going, it's all marble. It's absolutely gorgeous. The fact that it's marble and it's still in a recognizable condition is amazing. But the doors on it, those doors will never open unless they blast them open and break them, because the marble structure itself has settled so much. So that's if you're going by a mausoleum. Most mausoleums will have 3 steps. They'll, representing the Holy Trinity. That pretty standard. The Burnette, if you go by it, you can see 1 step, but there are 3, and the rest are underground.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So just the fact that you can still see like the pooties up on the arch and still see a lot of the definition and the flowers that are on it is amazing for a marble anything. Because if you go around the cemetery and you see a lot of the old children's graves, they would usually do like a little marble lamb, and most of those are just completely disintegrated. Now you just see this kind of marble lump that might be a lamb.
Yeah.
My favorite one is the toddler where the face is.
I love
her.
Yeah,
I go visit her. Yeah,
I have not dug into her history wise, but yeah, that was definitely between her and the Hoffner statue are the two that, like, my very first trip to Spring Grove was like, this is the most awesome thing ever, even though it's like it's cool because it's disintegrating, but I love that one.
I don't know which monument you're talking about, but
I have a picture. I will show you.
We took video.
Yes, please.
We took video. It'll be on the episode.
And I think I just stumbled across it one day, and I could never remember where it was, and then finally I know where it is now. I can go and go and see it. Yeah.
Hints for anybody listening, if you're going to get lost at Spring Grove Cemetery, I felt incredibly dumb when I learned this because it seems very obvious now. But there are, there's all the 42 miles of roadways. But when you go into the cemetery, you'll see dotted lines on the roads. So there's a white line, a yellow line, and a green line. The green line is where you're going to find Hunnifeld. The yellow line is where you're going to find the mermaid and the little girl with no face. The white line goes through the center of the cemetery. So no matter where you go in the cemetery, find a colored line. The yellow line, the green line will always go to the white line. The white line will go to the north entrance and down to the main entrance.
Oh, that's incredibly helpful.
Right. You can never get lost.
That's it. And one thing that struck me just when we were there on Sunday that I, usually I'm not paying attention to as much is just how many names when you're in there are on streets in Cincinnati. Like, there's Remelin, and there was Grossback, and there was, I guess there's Moorline, and there's like everything you can think of is in there.
Right. It's Cincinnati. It's absolutely a sampling of Cincinnati history. And with the Moorline and all of them, like doing the Beer Barons tour, Like, oh, I wish we could have that again this year. It's so much fun to talk about the brewing history in Cincinnati and drink the beers along with it. So giving a tour to drunk folks is amazing.
Oh, I bet.
Oh yeah.
So
fun.
So the girl with no face, is it a it looks like it's marble with a toddler wearing a dress and she's inside a little alcove. That is
Mhm.
Carrie T. Hurley, who died at
Yes.
age 5.
Aw.
I think
Yeah.
typhoid. Was it typhoid that killed her? She was sick, I think.
Oh my goodness, the family has written an extremely long obituary on Find a Grave for her. So I won't be
I will
able
have
to
look at
just
that.
Okay.
yeah. Yeah. Beloved daughter of somebody and Elizabeth Hurley. Died in August 7th, 1876 at 5 years and 4 months old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I'm looking at the factoid here about the Johnny Appleseed. Why did they build a Johnny Appleseed statue here if he's not buried here?
I
We were
have
looking at that
not a
yesterday.
clue in the world.
And it's so good. Is this part of the 80s thing? Because it's a very different style from everything in them.
All I can
Mhm.
say is Fort Wayne, Indiana has some words with you.
Oh yes, that is mentioned. Yes.
So for my, my knowledge base and what I tend to focus on, for doing tours, they don't want us to do tours of anybody that has died within the past 100 years because there's still potential for family to be around. So up in the section of the cemetery where Johnny Appleseed, where the statue is, there's nobody that I can talk about there, no matter how famous they are. So,
Interesting.
Yeah. So that's one of those things where I can tell you, a good chunk of information on the soldier of the line that's facing the Civil War section, but Johnny Appleseed, no. Give me another 20 years or so. I might be able to get up there.
Well, it's just interesting because the style of the sculpture is very different from everything else. Like you said, it's that
so
kind of
different.
80s sort of like. I mean, it's nice. It's just not Victorian or
I think that sculpture was built in 1978 or
Okay,
68.
so right before. Well, but it was kind of postmodernism sort of look. It's
Mhm.
not, and
Right.
I suppose you could almost where people talk about the Sensei Library, which goes viral every time pictures of it are released that was torn down. I mean, it's kind of in that thing, like in that era, they were like tearing down a lot of old stuff and building a lot of new stuff that now stands out as being especially hideous.
Right. Oh, every time they post about that library, I just want to go into a rage. Like, it was built for an opera house. Shut up. Like, it wasn't meant to house books.
Well, I think that's probably most of the libraries in today. There's all these spectacular buildings that are owned by the library that were my favorite is the building that's on, and this is a huge digression, but there's a building, it's on, on the west side, and it used to be a telephone switch station. And it's got all this, it's got all of this carvings of like early phones and people talking to them mixed with cherubs and stuff. And I just love that they had buildings like this where people designed facades like that, but it was for the telephone company.
Right. That had all of the symbology.
Yeah,
and,
it's like off Harrison Avenue, like kind of going a little bit south down Harrison. And it's owned by the library now. And the building is spectacular. And, there's all these buildings owned by the library like that. And they're astonishing. And you hope that they survive. I mean, it's just great.
Right.
I recommend everybody to look at it.
Another tangent just based off that. If you ever walk down 4th Street downtown, look up. Because there are so many faces on the buildings that are just cool. Like one day after work, I went down and spent a good couple hours just walking and taking pictures. And I did not realize how many faces were on the buildings.
Oh,
really cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it kind of looks like they kind of went through a phase where they were like that part we were talking about with the newer graves, where there's like those very contemporary looking ones where it's just sort of like, we don't care what's here. Let's just put new stuff.
Right. But I mean,
that actually brings me to another topic of conversation, which was the controversial headstones of Spring Grove. And there's a few. It's not just Spongebob, which everyone knows about because that happened within the past decade. So some of them aged really cool and are still around to this day. So Amanda.
I'm curious what other ones you've have dug up or
so doing a little bit of digging.
Yeah, I can talk about SpongeBob, but
yeah,
SpongeBob's
the last one.
Story.
Oh, it's actually rather tragic. So I have a little bit about that. But so we're gonna rewind all the way back to 1850, where we have our first controversy of a headstone when David B. Lawler, one of the founders of the cemetery, attempted to put a sphinx on his family's plot. Some directors had baskets of kittens and objected to the heathen symbol being put on this family plot. It eventually was allowed.
Yep, the Sphinx is definitely there. I can see how that would have been controversial, but then again, during that, later in the Victorian era, I mean, the Egyptian look was super popular. I mean, go to the
Hi there, 1922 and King Tutankhamun.
Right. But the Grossback Mausoleum, if you kind of take a step back and look at it, there's the allegorical figure at the top, but it does sort of resemble the Sphinx with its like the paws kind of coming down. Grossback is just it's a big mix of Art Deco and Egyptian, and there's urns everywhere. It's super cool, but can get kind of
Well, at that time period, and we've talked about that before, there was kind of this mix when you talk about the spiritualism. It was mixed with all this sort of, is it faux, like exotic imagery? Is that the right way to describe it? Like they wanted it to look exciting, like adding pyramids and Egyptian kind of appropriation.
Exoticism.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, appropriation, I guess, is kind of, that was early.
Yeah, there is one, and this was on getting lost through the cemetery, but kind of a shock to the system, but then realizing when the cemetery went in. But there is a sarcophagus that has a lot of symbology on it, and one of them is a swastika. So kind of taken aback, like, oh, but wait a minute, they were buried in 18 something, so it's okay. They just they knew a little bit about symbology, and that's all.
Well, yeah, and you'll still see the flipped, what is a swastika in Buddhist temples. I mean, if you go to Japan or South Korea or other places where there are Buddhist temples, I mean, there's parts of America too. And that's on a map. That is the little symbol that is on a map, meaning Buddhist temple. So, it's, So, okay, moving on to our second one. 10 years later, 1860. This fire engine inventor, Alexander Latta, unveiled his headstone to have a fire engine sculpted at the top of it. Yet again, the directors lose their shit and immediately say no to that plan, even though he invented the freaking fire engines. The Spring Grove rejected the design as being too commercial.
Yeah, I can completely see that. Although going to, what I'm assuming is the 80s, when just shit went weird for a while without having the kind of panel of people to approve and disapprove. And it's a child's grave, but you can see it kind of on the outskirts, but it's a train. It's this big arched, headstone with a marble train or a granite train on the top. And it's cute, but again, it doesn't fit the Spring Grove style.
So what did he have on his gravestone instead?
I was just looking it up, and I was trying to mute myself so I didn't hear the ticky-tacks of my keyboard. But let's see, Spring Grove Cemetery. Let me see if I can pull up his headstone real quick. Helps if I spell Alexander right. He has just a plain old, very short obelisk. He didn't get anything put on top of it. Poor guy.
That would have been kind of cool if it had been like an old steam engine or something.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So he died in 1865, so 5 years after the controversy happened. So 2014, the most recent controversy would be the Spongebob Squarepants headstones, and I think what is the contemporary area of the cemetery. The
Yep.
family of Army Sergeant Kimberly Walker erected 2 headstones, one for Kimberly and one for her twin sister, with the likenesses of SpongeBob SquarePants wearing military fatigues because one is in the Army and one is in the Navy. And the day after they went up, the Spring Grove Cemetery removed them, saying that it disrupted the historic cemetery and the look of it. 1 year later, on Valentine's Day 2014, the headstones were replaced with a settlement between the Walker family and Spring Grove Cemetery. Granite slabs have been put behind SpongeBob's, and SpongeBob's now face outside instead of at the road, so
Yep.
that when you're just driving down the road or walking down the road, you just see 2 black granite slabs. But if you go around, you'll see SpongeBob.
Yeah, and
Looking at
the granite slabs. It's personal thoughts and feelings aside of how this all happened. The granite slabs have poems that were actually done by her. So, and very haunting poems too, like talking about her death. And so that was really nice. We the docents did a tour of the more recent ones, the headstones that we can't put on the tour just yet, or on any tours just yet, and obviously SpongeBob, so we went and took a look at those. Interesting thing about that is during that whole hubbaloo, however you want to say that, there were people that had plots around the SpongeBobs and asked to move to other parts of the cemetery because they didn't want to be around all of this, foot traffic, and didn't want to be near these monstrosities. But what I thought was really cool is if you're looking at the granite poems, if you look directly to the left, there's a little bench, and it's a husband and wife plot. And they actually asked to be moved there because they said our grandkids and our great grandkids will love this. It's like, that's so cool that somebody saw the opportunity in it versus don't put me near though. Like,
You're dead. You're not going to know.
Right. So there are people there that do actually appreciate it. Another cool monument right there that people can see if they find them. There's a very modern black granite monument, and it's one of the rare pieces where people have the husband and wife have been cremated, and I think the husband has passed but the wife has not yet, but they're actually interred in the monument itself. So it's not completely sealed yet. Like, you can't go and mess with it, but it's not completely sealed. And when the other spouse passes, they will be there and interred up top versus in the ground.
So maybe this question is not for public knowledge, but Amanda, could you ever take us on a personal tour to show us these things?
Yeah.
Because I would love to know about the stuff that you can't talk about yet.
Right.
I do have one note on Sergeant Walker, but we can do that after the. Okay, I'll say it now. So on a darker note, I did want to give a little bit of context to why this was really bad for the Walker family. So Sergeant Kimberly Walker was found dead in her hotel room on Valentine's Day 2013 while she was stationed at Fort Carson, Colorado. Her boyfriend, Sergeant Montrell Mayo, was later arrested and charged with her murder. In 2014, he was found guilty of her premeditated murder by a panel of military officials. He is now serving life without parole.
Wow.
Good.
Yeah, definitely not a good situation. Like for that whole family, that was just misery from start to finish. It had to be. But what they did, and being able to have a spot where her twin sister can be next to her. I mean, they're super interesting to see, but they definitely don't fit Spring Grove.
They're very notable, I will say, for pulp culture illustrations being put onto granite. It's really well done. So, and they're notable. They're now a fixture of Spring Grove, and I kind of love it. It still gives that feeling of continual history being made within the cemetery.
Yep. And so, I don't know if you mentioned, but there is also they were fans of Dale Earnhardt. So there's Dale Earnhardt's number on on SpongeBob's arm on each of them.
I did not know that.
Aw.
Yep.
That's really sweet. I like that.
So what are the rules then for, because I know like the big, huge stone ones, they're crazy expensive. And like, I seriously doubt you can take up as much room as you could back then.
If you have a plot, you can use up your plot. It depends on how much space you have. So no, there's not really going to be any restrictions there. There are going to be design restrictions, which I'm not 100% sure on. But yeah, if somebody wanted to actually foot the bill for something like the Mulhauser obelisk, absolutely they could. But you can really get a good idea of some of just what things cost now versus back then. If you see some more modern things in the historical section. So there's right when you're coming away from the Statue of the Line, there is a newer family monument right there. And it's good size, but it's definitely not, massive like some of the other ones are. Another great example is when you're at the Robinson Mausoleum. If you look across the street, there's a, built within the past probably 10 years mausoleum. And it's gorgeous, but it looks like a dollhouse next to the Robinson Mausoleum.
Yeah.
Like, it's to be able to foot that bill. And that's, that's what a lot of it was about back then. It was the status of you and your family and everything that all the weird stuff that people got rich on back then. I guess not completely weird, but like, you had a starch empire. Like, why? So,
because starch. I mean, Procter and Gamble are buried there. So, soap and candles.
Right. Soap and candles. So, also fun fact with some of the more notable Cincinnatians, the Lindner family does have a plot there, but Charles Lindner specifically said he did not want to be buried there because he did not want to be on a tour. And where their plot would have taken everybody directly by them. So there is a monument that I think one of their longtime assistants is buried there on the Lindner property. Somebody else that worked for them. So, but you're not going to find a Lindner there.
Where did he get buried?
Wow.
Just a different cemetery, or
a different. I'm not 100% sure where he is. I'm possibly could do it on Find a Grave, but yeah,
he's just into it.
They still own the plot. They just, that's really interesting. Huh.
Yeah.
That's
so
cool.
I would imagine they probably bought it, a million years ago. Some real good UDF check came in and they bought a plot and didn't realize, oh God, we're gonna be on a tour. So
that actually brings us to interesting monuments. There we go. That's the word. Interesting monuments around the cemetery would be C.C. Brewer's family headstone. I'm not pronouncing his name right, given the blank stare I am getting from everyone. He is the guy known as Glass Eyes and is notably the most haunted thing in the entire cemetery. So he's interesting. I found some good information thanks to I don't want to call him friend of the podcast because he doesn't know us, but Greg Hand, who's a historian here in Cincinnati, who does really good work, does not know us from Adam, but I respect him. He got some really good information about Mr. CC.
Oh, please share.
All right. So I know I got some good photos of him. Everyone that looks up, is Spring Grove Cemetery haunted? You get the story of this headstone. And it's noted as being Glass Eyes, and it's for Charles C. Brewer. I'm probably mispronouncing that name. Please let me know how to pronounce it in the comments. He was rumored to be an optometrist. And if you look up a bunch of different historical articles written by people who aren't historians, they will keep reiterating this. I even reiterated this back in 2013 when I wrote about this particular monument.
Ask, where's the eyes that'll follow you? And like, well, you go up here and it's around the bend and whatever. Like, but I mean, it's interesting, but meh, as far as oddities on gravestones go,
it's not the most odd thing I've ever seen on a headstone. Sorry,
No.
Cece.
It's
but
really
so
not.
Greg busted this myth apart, and I love him for it. So, in reality, Cece was not an optometrist, but a salesman, a commission agent, and a real estate investor who just wanted to put a bust of himself in the middle of a cemetery because ego was high back then.
Yes, it was.
Other facts that Greg points out: he was married 3 times, disowned his own daughters, tried to blow up one of his own buildings, was declared insane, and died in a mental institution. So, dude had an interesting backstory.
Now the eyes
interesting
make sense.
all around. They're not just glass, but they're also crazy eyes. So,
Right.
Yeah.
And this also might be a good place to put in here. I do all this stuff with Spiritual Realm. I have a full belief in the paranormal world, all of that stuff. But when people ask me on a tour, is Spring Grove haunted? I like, no, this is probably the quietest place that I've ever been. Everybody here is resting in peace. Thank you. Let's move on.
That's a good answer.
Yeah.
That is a good answer.
I mean, there's definitely a couple of cemeteries that I've been to where I definitely did not like it. I did not want to be there. I did not want to talk to whoever was there. But Spring Grove,
not one of those places.
Not personally ever able to find it. So
very cool. Well, that brings us to other fun myths and legends. And also, thank you, Greg Hand, for subscribing to us last week.
Hey.
Thank you, Christina, for finding that information out. So the other great thing Spring Grove is rumored to have is George Reeves, the 1950s star of the Superman TV show, was buried in the cemetery. He is buried. He is very much certainly buried in California, but his autopsy was performed in Cincinnati. From what I read, this makes it sound like Spring Grove is a hotel. He stayed at Spring Grove for a year, then was cremated and sent back to California.
Right. So he was married to Eleanor Robinson Rose, or her stage name was Eleanor Needles. So they were married. They divorced after 9 years. The reason that he was brought to Spring Grove is the family was initially wanting to inter him in the Robinson Monument. So the Robinson family, big circus family, had a home in Terrace Park, the Tilly the elephant's buried there, all that fun stuff. But so George Reeves was brought to Spring Grove to be interred there and waited out his time in the White Pine Chapel, which is kind of, a little ways up in the cemetery, but that is, when the ground's too cold to be able to dig into, people, kind of wait out their time there. So George Reeves was there in the White Pine Chapel, come to, the conclusion that there was not enough room in the Robinson Mausoleum for him to be interred there. So he was then sent out to California.
Okay. I like how you use the term wait out their time.
Yeah, just
very polite.
Just waiting out the weather.
Do I get a highlights magazine in a juice box? I'd love that.
If you're quiet.
If I'm quiet. Oh, well, I'm hosed. Anyway, so other fun parts of the cemetery that are said to be haunted are sections 53 and 16, which are older parts of the cemetery. And they're noted for, interesting things. Wow, that was a great segue. Ran right into that wall. Section 53. People have reported the feeling of their ankles being grabbed by unseen hands. A caretaker reported, and this is before 2013, that while doing maintenance in the section, he saw a pair of ghostly hands reaching out of the ground for him. Also, wispy apparitions have been reportedly been seen wandering the area, as well as phantom voices.
Section 53. I'm pulling up a map right now because I am not. I'm definitely one of those people. I'm like, take the white line on like the 3rd Street on the left. You're gonna want to go.
Let's see.
Yeah. Does it say what? Does it happen to say what notable? Section 53. I mean, that's still technically, yeah, in a historic section, but that's pretty far up there.
I'm looking. Oh no, I just see shelter house.
Yeah.
It's like in the heart of the entire cemetery.
That's where we were on Sunday.
Now, did you see any ghostly hands going for your ankles?
No.
No.
We didn't really. I mean, it was very peaceful there until it started raining. We got caught in the rain.
Yeah. You guys did get a lot of rain.
I just see shelter house
there, and then
it's like in the heart of the entire cemetery.
That's where we were on Sunday.
Now, did you see any ghostly hands going for your ankles?
No.
No.
We didn't really. I mean, it was very peaceful there until it started raining. We got caught in the rain.
Yeah. You guys did get a lot of rain.
I was gonna sketch there, and then started pouring rain. It was like, okay, well, I won't sketch you.
What is it that you said, Christina? Something about it lets you know when it's time to go or something.
I said that I take that as a sign not to sketch here today if it starts pouring rain.
Yeah.
We've sketched through some pretty intense weather, windy weather. We sketched at Spring Grove probably at least 15 times. I mean, I've done so many sketches there. But I feel like I never go deep into it. I need to find some more places to sink my teeth into because I tend to stay very close to the entrance. But there's a lot of really cool stuff there. You have to kind of go out further.
So section 53 has Madhu in the south and Martin Huggins. Those are the two notable ones there.
Yeah, I'm not having any good luck quickly on Find a Grave, but
yeah, that one is, and then 16 is to the southwest, and they're along the yellow line, and
we're all
and 53 is along the white line, and 16 has Beatty, Briel or Bristol, Drosty. I'm going to get
Drost.
Drost, Emerson, and Chunky. Oh no, we're going to get so many families like. Don't you know how to speak anything in English?
Nope.
I'm mad that you come. Yeah.
I will be going to those sections this weekend, and I will report back if I find anything.
Well, section 16 is notable because it's where the resting place for William Kirk is, and that place has phantom voices being reported around that entire area. And what makes that interesting is William Kirk was the man who was murdered, and that court case sparked the courthouse riots of 1884. So the two men one was only found guilty of manslaughter. The other one was found guilty of murder and sentenced to hang. And the manslaughter verdict was just seen as completely untrue. It was completely planned, and the murder was planned and everything. So the riot is one of the worst American riots, I believe, in history, and it completely decimated the courthouse, and I think it killed 20 people.
Wow.
And so the man who was murdered, it sparked the entire thing, is buried in section 16.
That's where it'd have to be a little, phantom voices. That's also depending on where he is, but still section 16 is more the outskirts. you know, the side of the cemetery where you're bumping up against the north side. So there's business, there's houses, there, you know.
And there's people constantly going through the cemetery. It's not a quiet cemetery.
No.
Yeah.
But
other
but
places.
Phantom Hands, I'm down.
Phantom Hands, that one's interesting. That sounds like something that could be in a comic book. Funny thing, I happened to edit one of those. Anyhow, section 22 around Burnette Crypt is also said to be very spooky. Feelings of being watched from the crypt, and the crypt gives weird vibes to people who walk by.
It could be, like you said, about to fall over. So maybe that's the vibe.
Right. And
Maybe.
there's doors, like there's there's kind of gaps at the top, and there's almost little like peephole-y sort of things. So yeah, you'd look at it and think, oh crap, I'm being looked at. But the area around there is
It's so pretty there.
It is.
It's very
incredibly
pretty.
If you go back behind the Burnette Mausoleum, the Emery Angel is back there. Stearns and Foster are actually buried right behind Burnette. So, you know, the mattress guys who, if you've ever been in a business with somebody, hell, if you want to be buried next to them for eternity, but they chose to. So good job, Stearns and Foster. They were two relatively good dudes. But yeah, that kind of surprises me that people would think that area is. But I mean, you have the lake right across the street with all like the cedar knees coming up, and you know,
it's just that mausoleum that has freaked people out. Not the entire area, just that mausoleum. And then going back to our friend at the Dexter Mausoleum in section 20, it's said to be guarded by a pair of ghostly white dogs or wolves who growl at people passing by. Also, in another fun fact, in section 87, white wolves have also been seen and is said to bring bad luck to anybody who lays eyes upon them.
Oh, as they would.
As they would. So that's two very drastically different areas of the cemetery.
Interesting, and we were talking about this Speaking Stone book, which we're both reading, and it's not looking very good on my. And it has a really nice chapter about Laura Pruden, which I was just reading. Not only does it describe her technique for slate writing very well, but one thing it talks about her personal life and how she married Judge Pruden. Like her name was originally, and it's scandalous. They said the Inquirer was very hard on her because he was so much older than her. She was 39 and he must have been, I don't know, 60s, in his 60s or 70s. And she spent a lot of time dealing with lawsuits from his kids, trying to keep her from, I guess, getting any of his estate or whatever. Like
like Anna Nicole Smith.
I was just thinking that.
It was a lot of stuff I didn't know about her. And it had a lot of stuff about Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, which they said he was so good an orator and so, credulous when it came to, all of this sort of spiritualism stuff, that they said that people actually committed suicide after hearing him talk. And the book mentions that somebody killed his roommate and himself, saying there were no gas bills in the afterlife. And I was like, well, if he was that convincing, do we know there's no gas bills in the afterlife? We don't really know. Maybe there are. Maybe
certainly not a reason to murder someone.
Or
yourself.
It was a very interesting anecdote in the book. It has a lot of really interesting writing like that.
So now I'm kind of curious. I'll need to look back in my notes and also cross-reference with the book. But part of the interesting things with the Burnette Mausoleum is that's not originally, like, Judge Jacob Burnette was not part of that building process or part of that planning process at all. He was actually interred at another cemetery and no. They had a plot. He bought a plot at Spring Grove, and his wife wasn't happy with that, so took him out of the plot at Spring Grove, built the mausoleum, and interred him there.
Wow!
So I'm curious if that was the younger of the wives.
Well, that's probably true. Yeah, because Judge Pruden, he's got like a pretty big gravestone close, I guess, to Laura's, but I didn't look for it when I was there because I was just looking for Laura Pruden's grave, and I didn't realize he had like a giant one, so it must be somewhere in the family plot area. And I didn't know. I guess the Inquirer was pretty harsh in their depictions of it, because they got kind of married. This kind of tells you they kind of got married in secret. They didn't have anyone at their wedding, and they said that it was because they didn't want publicity, and it all sounded very scandalous. And we've talked a lot about like the Victorian. I'm gonna move my cat here because he's starting to get bored and he's starting to like dig and shred paper and stuff. Say hi to everyone, Conan.
Hi, Conan.
Hey there, Conan.
Cats do what they want.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's in full brat mood. He's starting to get bored and shred things on my desk. But anyway, it's just the book is full of really interesting anecdotes about this stuff. So it should be a fun read to read the rest of it.
Yeah. And like shout out to Michael Griffiths. So far, this is like it's such a good book about Spring Grove because it's not just Spring Grove. It's focusing more on, like you said, about the obituaries and these like little threads that tie people together. And it's just it's super interesting to read from that point because I'm educating myself on some of the more basics of the history. How did they tie into Cincinnati? And that's pretty much it. What did they contribute? But this being able to show how all of those connections were is just infinitely fascinating.
It's really and also this chapter talks about the Fox sisters, and I didn't realize they were like 12 and 14 when they started doing.
They were really
super
young.
And well, they didn't have Disney Plus back then. People were bored. They're like, let's just like talk to the dead. Why not?
It'd be TikTok for that particular age group. It's TikTok.
But one thing that's interesting that they've talked about, like mediums like Laura Pruden and the Victorian Spiritualism movement, was a lot of women did it because it was a way to make money. When we talk about it, I guess life really never does change. People getting side hustles and stuff like that. And in the spiritualism movement, talking to the dead was a big supporter of a lot of women. That didn't have other means to make money. They just like grab a couple slates and start writing on them.
The paranormals has always been a way, I almost said a medium, for women to
no pun intended.
Yeah, no pun intended there. To gain control, like authority, political or otherwise, through society. And that's a lot. We can go into a really long anthropological discussion about that. But we value the listeners' attention spans too much to do that. So
we probably should
I
wrap
just
it up.
see their eyes glossing over just like CC's statue. And just like, no, it's too much information for right now.
Way to bring that back together, Kat. I like it.
I think we probably should wrap it up. And I think we'll skip our hometown haunt this weekend or this week because it's gone a little long. So we'll read it next week.
Okay.
I do have one question. Are there any famous or infamous criminals buried in Spring Grove?
Not that I know of. I'm sure that we'll have a much deeper knowledge base on that. No, I know where some of the famous folks that weren't too famous, like, I know where the Charlie and Edie Harper are because I'm a huge fan. One that's kind of fun, especially for some of the older folks, is the Cool Ghoul.
Oh, really?
There.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So he is buried there. It's a small, like, round of footstones with an urn in between. And the tale of it is that every year on Halloween, there is a pumpkin placed on the Cool Ghoul's grave. Aww. So, yep.
I don't know who Cool Ghoul is.
He was a television host.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Before my time.
Before your time.
Well, like, Elvira is a horror host. Spenguli is a horror host.
Oh, fun.
Cool Ghoul was Cincinnati's horror host.
Okay. Horror movies and stuff on TV. He was cool. And he was a cool.
Shout out to Sammy Terry for everyone from Indy. Sammy Terry.
But I think we could probably talk about Spring Grove for hours. We'll have to have you on again to talk about this more. Like after we finish the book, for example.
Right. Yeah. Let's finish the book. I will take y'all on a newer monument tour, and we can wander a little bit together. Absolutely. We will do part 2 of Spring Grove.
Yeah,
that would be wonderful.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Yes, thanks, Amanda.
Y'all are always fun to talk to. And now until, we're shut down again, we can go visit a cemetery together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have a couple weeks.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Boy.
The modern horror story.
I know.
Right.
On that note, I guess we'll do the outro and
Yeah. On that note, good night, everyone. I'm Kat. There's Jen. There's Christina. Stay safe and stay curious and sanitize everything.